There is a silent, almost imperceptible moment when the act of helping stops being love and becomes a prison. We grow up believing that helping is always the path of light. We are taught that being good means always being available, always giving, always saying yes. But what happens when that yes starts to hurt us? When someone else's weight settles on our shoulders and we call it kindness? Alan Watts used to say that the path of awakening is the path of discernment, and perhaps the true test of compassion is not how many people you help, but how many you have the courage not to help. Because some people don't want to be saved. Some souls need to get lost in order to find themselves, and when you interfere with the lesson that life has prepared for them, you prevent them from growing. Love, then, becomes distorted. It turns into attachment, into fear, into control disguised as compassion. In this video, we won't talk about coldness or indifference. We'll talk about wisdom. We'll talk about 6 types of people who drain your energy, confuse your kindness, and pull you away from your own center. Recognizing them is not judgment, it's awakening. Because the love that liberates is different from the love that imprisons. And today, in the light of Alan Watts' words, you'll be invited to discover that difference. Chapter 1. The Golden Prison of Compassion. The ego disguised as a savior. There is a subtle form of ego that dresses itself in light. It doesn't seek power, fame, or applause. It seeks to be needed. It's the savior's ego, the one that believes its mission is to heal everyone who suffers. It feels alive when it carries someone else's burdens, when it fixes, advises, rescues, and the world applauds it for that. They call it good, generous, enlightened. But inside, it's exhausted. Alan Watts used to say that no wave can save the ocean because the wave is the ocean. Helping others is a noble act until it's born from the need to feel indispensable. True love doesn't need gratitude, it simply flows. But love disguised as need turns into control. I help you because without your pain I wouldn't know who I am. The compulsive savior is a mirror of an unhealed wound, the wound of not feeling enough. That's why they give themselves away until they're lost. They forget that the other person also has a soul, a journey, a destiny, guided by invisible forces that don't need our constant interference. True compassion is silent. It offers presence, not dependence. It lights the way but doesn't walk it for anyone. When we help to ease our guilt or to prove our worth, we turn love into a burden. But when we help with awareness, with boundaries, with respect for the other's timing, that's when love becomes wisdom. So ask yourself, when you help, are you serving the other person's soul or your own fear of not being loved? That's the fine line where love is purified and ego dissolves. Chapter 2. The First Mirror, the Chronically Inert. There are people who confuse help with support. They drown in their own excuses and call it destiny. They live in a cycle of unfulfilled promises, unfinished projects, postponed dreams. There's always an external reason, a culprit, a circumstance that prevents them from moving forward. And then come the good ones, us, ready to carry, fix, resolve. But as Alan Watts reminds us, life teaches through discomfort. Suffering is the master that awakens the sleeping. When you prevent someone from feeling the weight of their choices, you deprive them of the chance to grow stronger. Nature doesn't sustain what doesn't grow. A branch that doesn't bloom is pruned, not out of cruelty, but out of wisdom, so the energy can return to the roots and generate new life. The same applies to human relationships. If you're always feeding another's immobility, you become part of the cycle of stagnation. The chronically inert person is someone who's grown accustomed to being carried. They don't want to change. They want to be comforted. They use their pain as an argument, their weakness as a shield. And you, with an open heart, join the game, believing you're helping. But deep down, you're only prolonging their spiritual sleep and your own exhaustion. The practice is simple but profound. Observe. When someone asks for your help, ask yourself, does this person want to move, or do they just want me to move for them? If your first impulse is guilt when you say no, breathe, because a conscious no is sometimes the purest form of love. Letting go is also caring, and when you free yourself from the need to save others, you give them the sacred right to awaken on their own. Chapter 3. The second and third mirrors, the ungrateful and the arrogant. Ingratitude is one of the most subtle forms of emotional vampirism. It doesn't scream or attack, but it consumes. The ungrateful person feeds on your effort and calls it obligation. They receive your time, your care, your love, and still feel it's never enough. Gratitude, Alan Watts said, is the recognition of interconnection. It's the moment when the ego bows and admits, nothing I have is mine alone. But the ungrateful one doesn't see that web. They live in a universe where everything is owed to them, and the more you offer, the more they demand. They don't want your help, they want your exhaustion, because the void inside them can't be filled by anything external. And the more you try to please them, the more you reinforce their belief that the world exists to serve them. The arrogant, on the other hand, is the mirror image of that dynamic. While the ungrateful asks too much, the arrogant rejects everything. He is the man who believes he already knows, the disciple who doesn't listen, the sick person who refuses the medicine because he believes he's immune. And as Watts said, arrogance is the wall that keeps wisdom out. Arrogance is born from fear, the fear of seeing oneself as small, of admitting mistakes, of learning. That's why every attempt to help an arrogant person is useless. They turn advice into offense and love into threat. The only thing that can break their armor is a fall. Pain is the teacher that pride rejects, but life keeps sending. When you meet the ungrateful or the arrogant, remember, helping is not convincing. It's lighting the way and moving on. If your light is genuine, sooner or later they'll see it. But it's not your role to force the awakening of someone who still chooses to sleep. Chapter 4. The shadows that contaminate, the manipulator and the habitually perverse. Not all darkness asks for healing. Some shadows feed on the light of others, consciousnesses that don't seek redemption, but domination. These are the people Alan Watts would call dangerous to the soul. The manipulator and the habitual perverse. The manipulator is the trickster archetype, the sacred deceiver. He knows human weaknesses, guilt, empathy, the desire to be good, and he uses them as tools. He doesn't ask for help directly, he inspires it. He makes you want to help. He makes you say yes when your body's already screaming no. And when you finally see the game, you're already trapped in webs of confusion, guilt, and doubt. He changes form, from victim to hero, from fragile to strong, depending on the audience. And in the end, when you refuse to keep serving his play, he turns you into the villain of his story. The habitually perverse doesn't manipulate to survive. He manipulates for pleasure. He knows what he's doing and still goes on. He's the one who uses your generosity to wound, who turns trust into a weapon. And if you help him, if you cover for his lies, if you try to heal him, you become complicit in your own depletion. Watts said that wisdom is the art of perceiving what must not be touched. The manipulator and the perverse are dangerous invitations to betray yourself in the name of compassion, and the antidote is discernment. The practice is simple but profound. Before extending your hand, feel. If your energy contracts, if there is fear, guilt, or pressure, step back. True love doesn't manipulate, demand, or wound. It simply is. Protect your light. Not every soul that cries for help wants to be saved. Some only seek company in their own darkness. Chapter 5. The unconscious rebel and the fool who refuses to see. Some people seem destined to walk in circles. They know the way, have heard the advice, have felt the pain, yet they always end up back at the same point. It's the cycle of the unconscious fool, the one who refuses to learn. And often, the fool and the rebel walk side by side. The unconscious rebel is the one who confuses freedom with opposition. He doesn't want to discover what's true. He just wants to deny everything that confronts him. He doesn't seek transformation. He seeks control. And thus, he becomes a slave to his own resistance. Alan Watts said, "The more we resist reality, the more we suffer." That's the rebel's tragedy. His battle is against ghosts he himself creates. The fool, meanwhile, isn't ignorant, he's stubborn. He feels the fire of life, but still puts his hand on the same flame, believing that this time it will be different. He clings to the illusion that he can repeat the same patterns and harvest new results, and when everything falls apart, he looks around for someone to rescue him. Maybe, once again, that someone is you. But here's the hard truth. You cannot want someone's awakening more than they do. Consciousness cannot be forced. It blooms exactly when the inner soil is ready. And the soil of the fool, of the rebel, is still hard, not out of malice, but out of fear. Watts reminded us that life is a school without walls. Each soul has lessons that only pain can teach. When you protect someone from falling, you prevent them from learning how to rise. And there are falls that are necessary, falls that purify, that break the ego, and return it to humility. The practice, then, is to observe without interfering, to allow the fool to find the silence of his own consequences, to allow the rebel to realize that fighting against everything is just another form of imprisonment. When you stop fighting for them, the universe begins to fight with them. And in that space of surrender where control dissolves, true compassion is born, not the kind that tries to save, but the kind that trusts. Because in the end, every soul, even the most stubborn, will be led back to its center, but not through your effort, through life's own silent wisdom. Chapter 6, The Inner Mirror, the Savior that lives within us. After seeing all these faces, the ungrateful, the arrogant, the manipulative, the foolish, the rebellious, comes the deepest question of all. What if each of them is just a reflection of something within ourselves? Alan Watts said, "There is no separation between the observer and the observed. What irritates, hurts, or exhausts us in someone else reveals something within us that still seeks integration." That's why the real work isn't just recognizing whom not to help. It's understanding why we feel such a strong need to help at all. The savior archetype lives in all of us. It's the part that believes love must be proven through sacrifice. It's the boy who grew up believing he'd only be worthy if he were useful. The woman who learned to take care of everyone before herself. The spiritual seeker who confuses enlightenment with total self-denial. But the soul doesn't ask for sacrifice, it asks for wholeness. Helping others is divine, yes, when it comes from a free heart. But when it comes from a wound, it becomes mutual imprisonment, because every savior needs someone to save. And so the cycle never ends. While you're trying to heal the world, life is trying to heal you. The path is to return inward, to recognize that every person who drained you merely showed you where you hadn't yet set boundaries. Every manipulation revealed where you weren't listening to yourself. Every ingratitude pointed to how much you still longed to be seen. True awakening isn't distancing yourself from others, it's seeing yourself in them. When you integrate your inner savior, the impulse to carry others fades, and something new arises, a loving, free presence that respects the timing of every soul. Watts said, "Compassion is seeing suffering without getting lost in it." That's the point of spiritual maturity, when you can look at another's pain without confusing it with your own. Helping then stops being an act of need and becomes an act of freedom. And in that space of freedom, love returns to what it has always been, not a duty, but a silent gift that binds nothing, demands nothing, and illuminates everything. Conclusion: the love that liberates. Discernment is an act of wisdom. Perhaps now you see that helping isn't always love. Sometimes it's fear, fear of seeing someone suffer, fear of being rejected, fear of not being good enough. But true love doesn't come from fear, it comes from trust, from the deep faith that every soul has its own time to bloom. Alan Watts said, "Life is like a river, and the river knows where it's going." You don't need to push the flow of the water, just let it move. The same goes for people. Some need to get lost to find themselves, to fall, to remember how to rise. And your role isn't to stop them, it's to keep the flame lit, even from afar. Discernment is loving without losing yourself. It's understanding that compassion without awareness becomes a prison. It's realizing that allowing another's pain is sometimes the greatest act of kindness there is. Because suffering, when lived with presence, becomes the gateway to consciousness. So before offering help, be still and ask yourself, is this person ready to walk, or do they still need to crawl? If the answer is the latter, step back. Trust life's timing, and if this video spoke to your soul, share it. Leave a comment. Who came to mind as you heard these words? Perhaps in naming them, you'll begin the process of liberation. And remember, the love that truly heals is not the one that holds on, it's the one that lets go.